Welcome to Behind the Audition podcast with your host, Curt Hilton. Listen in on interviews with voiceovers, filmmakers, producers, animators, and much more. Curt, a voice actor himself, will give insider tips to the business, talk with guests about how they got into the business, and be sure to stay tuned to the end of the podcast when he challenges his guests with a pop-up audition. Now it's time for Behind the Audition podcast. Here's Curt Hilton.
Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Audition podcast. On this episode, I got to speak to the amazing St. Louis Sports Hall of Famer and PA announcer, Tom Calhoun. We talked about how he started as a PA announcer, teaching mass communications at Southwestern Illinois College, what you should do if you want to get into the industry, and some great NHL stories on and off the ice. So sit back and enjoy another episode of Behind the Audition podcast. All right, my next guest, I am so excited to have on the show. For those that have listened to the show, know I'm from outside the St. Louis area. Grew up in a small town of St. Peters, Missouri, but growing up, I used to go to all the Blues games, Cardinals games, and for those that are Chicago fans, who cares? I'm kidding. But coming next on the show, ladies and gentlemen, Tom Calhoun. How are you doing today?
Hey, Curt, I'm good. And by the way, St. Peter's is not so small anymore. It's been growing along with St. Charles in that part of the metro area, and pretty significant part of our metro these days.
Absolutely. You know, I graduated from 1994 from Ford Zumwalt South High School. Lived there until, like I said, I grew up, being a child to about 2001. Then I moved off to Colorado, then not some other states. Now I'm in Raleigh, but still followed the Blues. And there you were at my first game. My first game was at the Big Barn, and it was senior. It was
arena,
senior. Yeah, it was senior night. And that specific game, Brendan Shanahan got in a big old fight, and he's remember him sliding on his knees, and he just started pummeling this guy. And I just remember this is something I've been missing out on. But I remember hearing your voice throughout the game, like, wow, this guy has like the coolest voice of God, like in any arena. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you. And anybody refers to me as the voice of God, man, you're my best friend right off the bat. There are actually several guys who do PA work around the National Hockey League and other professional sports that I think have a much better voice than I do, but mine has served me pretty well.
But you have the one that fits hockey, and I feel bad because, Cardinals games, they have, a specific announcer that, he worked for KC95, when I was there, and
John Hewlett.
John has that voice that, when you call players up, you just know that's John. But you have that voice, that you do voiceover stuff as well, and like you did the ads, and the ads even sounded cool. You'd say like, Blues fans, be sure to stick around for the game, but had that cool announcer voice, but it wasn't too over the top, and it was it was very memorable. So,
well, there's a fine line you have to walk between different pieces of work that you're given to do, and when you're announcing a goal, of course, you can go over the top with it. When you're doing a promo or some sort of announcement that is aside from the game, you just want to make sure that you communicate it well so that everybody understands the words that you're putting out there. And, the voice quality that you have naturally is more important there, I think, than when you are trying to get people excited about an element of the game.
Absolutely. And so before you got into PA announcing, what did you do before then, and how did you get into this industry?
Well, I always wanted to be the next Jack Buck when I was a kid. I wanted to be a baseball broadcaster, and I went to college to learn how to do that and do sports play-by-play. That was my intention when I got into the broadcasting field. In order to put food on the table, I took a lot of different jobs along the way that were not necessarily baseball broadcasting, but they were sports related. I worked at various radio stations doing high school and college sports, play-by-play, and at one point I was hired to do studio work for KXOK Radio in St. Louis, which at the time, back in the 1980s, was a fairly significant station in the talk radio business. And we were carrying blues hockey games at that time. And it just so happened that they needed a guy to do the PA announcing for the games. And my boss called me into the office one day and said, you know, you might be good at that. You might want to go talk to the people at the Blues and see if you're a fit. And I did, and they asked me to fill out a season back in the 86-87 season because the guy who had been doing it took another job and he couldn't keep doing the PA announcing. And I said, well, I'll have the season. That really wasn't my intention with my career at that point. When I started doing it, I found that I enjoyed it. And it was kind of sexy to make an announcement and 20,000 people roar at you, at whatever you say. So, excuse me. So, you know, they've made it worth my while. The Blues have all these years, and here I am 35 years later still doing it. So it's been a great part of my life. I didn't really expect that I'd be doing this all my life, but it's become what I've been known for.
Absolutely. You know, you started January 3rd, 1987. So you came in right at that time, you know, Hall and Oates, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as well as, like I said, we talked earlier, Brendan Shanahan and, you know, Cujo and all the greats in the, you know, 80s, 90s. And what was your most memorable moment watching hockey? Like, I know there was one with Bob Plaker, right? You want to tell us about that story? Like, was that probably one of the most memorable moments you had, you know, being behind the booth?
Well, Bob Plager was a great blues player, and I always enjoyed being around him. But a couple of other ones actually are more memorable than anything that Bobby, any experience I had with Bobby. One was the first time I introduced Wayne Gretzky.
Oh, okay, yeah.
When he came to the Blues back in the 90s. It was just a magical evening the first time he skated on the ice wearing a Blues sweater. And it was the first time that I remember being nervous doing the player intros before the game, because there was just so much electricity in the building that night that, you know, if I screwed that up, it was not going to go well. I'd be remembered for screwing up the Wayne Gretzky intro for the rest of my life. But it went pretty well. I was a little bit nervous, as I say, but we got through it. And that night was just very special. There was another night in 1996 where the Red Wings and the Blues got into a line brawl on the ice right at the beginning of the game, and they put Bob Probert into the penalty box.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a famous fighter back in those days, and he was a nice guy and always joked around when he came in the penalty box, and we saw him a lot in the penalty box in those days. But there was a lot of player fighting going on the ice, but he was the first one to get put in the penalty box. And some guys behind the glass were giving him some stuff, and he didn't take it too well. He was going to go up over the glass out of the penalty box to go after these guys. And I made the mistake of grabbing him by the trunks and trying to pull him back into the penalty box because he was right next to me then. And he looked at me and said, "You don't want to do that." And I said, "Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking, Bob. Just let's forget about it." So that was a pretty memorable one. Almost getting punched by Bob Probert, but he's passed away. But he was quite the guy back in those days. There's a lot of other stories I could tell, but those two come to mind right away.
See, that would be so cool to be in that moment, because at that moment probably you weren't even thinking about, hey, I'm a PA announcer for the Blues. I'm actually I'm so hyped up from this game that I'm actually grabbing a hockey player. So yeah. I mean, there's nothing like hockey. There's nothing like hockey, especially playoff hockey. Living here in Raleigh, the Carolina Hurricanes, they have some
Mhm.
amazing fans too. And I just love going to to the environment and just, taking it all in. What would you say for somebody that would want to would want to get into being a PA announcer? What's some advice you'd give to them, like to where to start out and, how to get that position?
Well, I've actually kind of written a book about this particular subject, and it hasn't been released yet because I haven't found the correct way to do that yet. But um, my emphasis in teaching communications, I teach a little bit here at the community college locally, and whenever I get this question about how do you get into this kind of work, I always first off say, get command of the language, become a linguophile, become somebody who knows the language, knows what each word you might run into along the way, what the meaning of it is, maybe what the derivation of the word is, because that is your currency. That is the money that you have that you offer to whoever might employ you. You have to be able to demonstrate command of the language at a moment's notice. There will be a lot of times when you're asked to ad lib an announcement. You're not always reading from a script, and you're not always given time to think about what you're going to say. So you have to be able to, at a moment's notice, sound professional. And if you don't sound professional, guess what? You're not going to keep that job very long. So command of the language is a big thing. Practicing pronunciations of especially proper nouns, people's names, people's hometowns and things like that might throw you for a loop. You have to get a good feel for how, especially in hockey, where you have people from all over the world playing this sport at a professional level, and very very strange. I don't know what the correct word is. Very strange names, surnames that you're going to run into, Eastern European names that have about 42 consonants and one vowel in them, are going to throw you for a loop from time to time. So practice, read, and understand the language is kind of the bottom line for me.
Absolutely. You find things around the house. I've talked to voiceovers in the past where we grab something in the cabinet and you read the back, read the copy on the back of the product. When I did live in St. Louis before I moved, I was a DJ at the Stage Left Lounge there in Harris Casino. I got to on Saturday nights we'd have local radio with Lance Hildebrand, Greg Hewitt, and Dana Daniel, Smash, and all them come in, and they were all doing voiceover work. And they all gave me the advice, coaching, working with other talent to learn this industry before you think you can do it, because when you've done voiceover work, the biggest thing you have to have is thick skin and being able to take critiquing, especially you being a professor at the college. Do you tell your students how important it is to be able to take critique, good or bad?
Sure. Absolutely. Your idea of how a particular script should be interpreted sometimes is right, but you're actually performing for somebody else who has it in their mind how that script was written and how it should be performed. And if you don't deliver it that way and they want it that way, you have to be able to adjust to that. It's not always going to be your way when you walk into the studio to record something. It's going to be whoever's paying the bill to have that piece of copy recorded. It's got to be their way. And if you aren't willing to adjust to their wants and desires when it comes to that, you're not going to probably be in the business very long, because once you do something, or once you become a problem talent, it will be known in the industry that that's who you are, and you're not going to be hired very much to do this kind of work. So, yeah, I tell my students, you're all smart young people, and I'm sure you have a lot of ideas on how things are supposed to work, but be flexible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, you think about it in this industry, and you said, like you said, you did voiceover work before. When you did like the work for the Blues, like when you do between the commercials, was it like you had a certain amount of time? So, you had to do, kind of like, I guess they would say ads, in-house ads for like sponsorship and, coming up events. Did they tell you have 15 seconds or you have a 75 word copy? Did they tell you that stuff, or you kind of just wing it, grab the paper and go?
Are you talking about inside the games?
Yeah, inside the games. Yeah,
Or
yeah.
Usually what I am given is a piece of copy that somebody has written and fairly well timed out for whatever part of the game it's going to be presented in. So I'm really not under much pressure to deliver a 15-second or a 30-second read in those situations. So, I don't really worry about that too much when I'm supposed to read a promo or a commercial or whatever it might be. It's pretty well timed out before I get my hands on it. So, my thinking there is make sure you deliver each word on the copy properly. Don't stumble on it. Just, make sure that you're communicating the message properly.
Absolutely. And so as a voiceover as well as a PA announcer, how do you keep your voice healthy? How do you keep from not getting sick? How many games have you gone now without you've never called in sick? I'm not going to jinx it, but how many games have you gone now without
I don't have the exact number, but I know I'm 2 or 3 games short of 1,600 consecutive games.
Wow.
Since 1987. Yeah.
So how do you keep healthy with your throat healthy?
Oh, sometimes it's not easy. I have been pretty well sick enough to call in sick a few times, but once I got the streak going, I thought, man, it's going to take a lot to keep me at home to not show up. But main thing is to take care of your voice. I usually, before I go to the game, I'll do some vocal exercises on the way while I'm driving in, mouth stretching and, making sure that the instrument is ready to perform. And beyond that, it's just, I've been pretty lucky, actually, Curt, to stay as healthy as I have been over the course of my career. A few times I've had laryngitis and I had a squeak out an announcement or two along
a Phoebe moment.
But yeah. So, and usually if I'm not 100%, I'll tell somebody at the games, my supervisor or somebody, hey, you know what? I'm just not up to my usual standards tonight. Don't be surprised if you get a weird sounding announcement along the way somewhere, and they're usually pretty good about that. But your original question, how do I stay healthy? I don't really have a good answer for that. It's just that I've been really lucky health wise. Before each game, I have a recoil cough drop that I suck on and keep the throat lubricated that way. And the instrument that God gave me has thankfully been ready to go.
So I think you just found a new sponsor for yourself.
Well,
make sure
I'm not the only one. There's also a product called Throat Coat that I've used a few times. It's basically a tea that's got some licorice and other elements to it that I keep a couple of packets of those in my briefcase in case my throat's particularly scratchy or needs a little help on a given night. And I'll get a cup of hot water and mix that in there, and that usually helps too. So there's another sponsor.
There you go. So who is you can tell me, because I have my favorite players. Who is your favorite player that you got to meet and you were just like kind of almost starstruck?
Well, there's a long story about meeting Wayne Gretzky, and this was actually before he was a member of the Blues, and he was he was still a member of the Edmonton Oilers at the time, and I was working still in radio and hadn't even started doing the PA for the Blues at that time. But he was on the radio station that I was working for, and I was asked by Dan Kelly, the great Dan Kelly, to give him a ride back to his hotel after the radio show. And to make a long story short, we got within a block of his hotel, and after a nice conversation with him, he said, "Isn't there a Playboy Club here in town, Tom?" I said, "Well, yeah, I think there is." And he said, "Well, you want to go down there and have a couple of beers?" And believe it or not, Curt, here was my answer. And this was before cell phones and such. So I said, "Well, my wife, because it snowed last night, my wife's probably waiting for me to get home. I better get on home." He's, "Okay, fine. Well, drop me off at the hotel." So I've regretted that answer ever since, not going to the Playboy Club and having a couple of beers with Wayne Gretzky. What a dummy I was.
But you know what, though? You could tell the story and your wife can hear it every day and every time, and you'll be out of the What do you mean?
Be out of the doghouse.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so yeah, that's just would be a story that you probably would slap yourself, but that is hilarious.
Yeah, that's there's a longer version of that story. You got the condensed version, but that's the bottom line of it. And yeah, he was amazing even then too, and he was only, I don't know, 23, 24 years old at the time. And well, maybe a little older than that, but anyway, he was an amazing guy to meet. A lot of other players over the years, Brett Hull's been an amazing guy to hang out with. The few times I've had a chance to do that. And well, Brendan Shanahan was that kind of a guy.
Yeah.
You mentioned him earlier, and when he was on they used to have Christmas parties for all of us who worked for the team.
Yeah.
And our kids would be invited to skate and have fun on the ice at the building. And Santa Claus would always show up, and the kids would sit on Santa Claus's lap and, tell them what they wanted for Christmas and so forth. Well, one year it wasn't Santa Claus, it was Shanty Claus, because Brendan Shanahan put on the beard and the Santa Claus suit, and he was the Santa Claus for that particular event, and everybody got a kick out of that. And he was just one of those guys, a commanding presence, even as a very young man, who and now of course he's president of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So you could kind of see that in him even back in those days, that he was going to be a leader of men in some way.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I went to Brendan Shanahan when he got traded. That was like a devastating thing for me. I got invited to a wedding to his equipment manager at the time for the Blues. And I went to the wedding, and I found out that Brendan Shanahan got traded, and who comes up but Mike Keenan. And it was such a mixed vibe at the wedding, because he invited Mike Keenan, but Shanahan was supposed to come, but he didn't come. But that player was probably the one I was most excited about to see play, and then we got traded. It was pretty devastating at that time. So, but yeah, you do such an amazing job that if you've never been to a Blues game, and if you are in St. Louis, listen to this, you are probably one of the best PA announcers that I've heard. And this just the environment that you give is just amazing.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, Curt. And I, whenever somebody appreciates what you do, it's humbling, and I appreciate that. And I, again, have been real lucky health-wise and otherwise to work for 5 different ownerships of the Blues. And over the years, they have all appreciated the kind of work that I do at the microphone, and it just makes you feel great. And being the PA announcer for the Blues for as long as I have been has allowed me to be inducted into the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, and that happened a couple of years back. And I still shake my head and say, what did I do really to deserve this? But obviously, people have appreciated my approach to doing the PA work for the Blues, and I'm thankful for that. that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to have some fun with you now. This is a part of the show
Okay.
that I call it the Audition Challenge. And I made something
Okay.
specifically for you. And if, again, for those that are from the St. Louis area will understand this copy.
All right, here we go. And I always got to cup the hand behind the ear,
I
otherwise
love it.
it doesn't work. Hockey fans, take tonight's stop to your local Magic Market for a free 200-ounce choice of soft drink and a bag of toasted ravioli potato chips. Magic Market. Are we still open?
Oh my gosh, you have made a kid's dream come true, man. That was awesome. I mean, again, when you go to a game and you take in the environment, you take in the popcorn, the soda, the beer, whatever you take, and you have that person that you has that voice of memorable. That's you, Tom. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time today to come on the show. And I will ask you my cliche question, like I ask everybody. For those want to be a PA announcer, for those want to be a voice actor, what words of wisdom would you give before they get into the industry?
Just to be a good person, be a person who understands and has command of the language. And if you have a dream to do this kind of work, have that thick skin that you talked about earlier. Don't let somebody tell you that you're not good enough and let that be the end of your dream. Just keep on keeping on and stick with it. Somebody somewhere will see your enthusiasm for what you're trying to do. And enthusiasm in a lot of cases is more important than actual talent.
Absolutely. That's great. My family still lives back in St. Louis, got a bunch of friends that I still keep in touch with. One of these times I got to get back, see a Blues game, and maybe I'll come up and say hi. And, it'd just be so good to see another Blues game. And again, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, I'm thankful that you asked. It was fun. And whenever you come back to see a Blues game, you let me know. You'll be my guest.
Oh my gosh, that will be so much fun. I appreciate it. Tom, we'll stay in touch. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
You too, Curt. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
For more information about Tom Calhoun, go to paguytom.com.
Thanks for listening in on Behind the Audition podcast, made possible by Hilton Productions. If you need a male or female voiceover, contact us at hiltonproductions.com. Hilton Productions, let our voices do the selling.